Welcome back to This Explainer. Today we're tackling something we all have but barely ever think about, the invisible thread connecting your physical self to the digital world. We're talking about personally identifiable information, or as you'll usually hear it called, PII. It literally sits at the very foundation of our modern digital lives, and it governs how every single organization on the planet interacts with us. So, using the incredibly detailed primers from a man's AI journal, we're going to break down exactly how your identity is legally defined, stored, and protected.
Take a second and just ask yourself, what exactly makes you, well, you, in the eyes of the law? Honestly, it's not some deep philosophical question. It is a rigid, technical, and very legal reality. We generate just mountains of data every single day, leaving these digital footprints everywhere we go. But at what exact point does a random string of numbers, or maybe a physical trait, or a simple digital habit transform into a legal representation of your actual human identity? Well, that invisible line is exactly what we're mapping out today.
Okay, let's dive into this. At its core, PII is an information security term. And while there are a bunch of formal definitions floating around out there, the fundamental principle is actually pretty straightforward. It's basically any information that an organization can use, either completely on its own or by snapping it together with other information, to do three specific things. It can identify you, it can contact you, or it can locate you as a single specific person. It can also be used to identify an individual within a highly specific context. Think of it as the ultimate tether between a cold, massive database and a living, breathing human being.
Now you might be wondering, why does defining this tether matter so much? Why do organizations actually care? Well, because holding on to people's identities carries heavy technical and legal burdens. When an organization stores, processes, or manages data, they have to know exactly what they're holding. Because if that data identifies people, boom, it instantly triggers a massive cascade of additional responsibilities. They're suddenly looking at stringent security requirements, and in many cases, super complex legal and compliance mandates. In short, knowing what qualifies as PII literally dictates an organization's entire security posture.
But, and this is important, not all identity data is treated equally. The absolutely crucial distinction here is the harm principle. Basically, we categorize data into non-sensitive and sensitive PII. Non-sensitive PII is relatively low stakes. Think of a random zip code completely on its own. Because it won't actually cause harm to an individual if intercepted, it can be transmitted in an unsecure form. Sensitive PII, though, that's a whole different story. A social security number, for instance, absolutely must be transmitted and stored securely, usually using heavy encryption. If sensitive PII is disclosed or falls into the wrong hands, it could actively and directly cause harm to the person it belongs to.
So who actually gets to write the rules here and decide what counts as PII? Well, it depends entirely on where you live. Let's take a quick, completely impartial world tour of international privacy laws, because looking at how different regions define your data reveals a whole lot about how they view privacy itself.
Starting in the US, the NIST guide is highly pragmatic. It really focuses on distinguishing or tracing your identity through a specific identifier, like a name, a social security number, or a biometric record. But jump over to the European Union under Directive 95/46/EC, and the scope just explodes. They define personal data not just by an ID number, but by factors specific to a person's physical, physiological, mental, economic, cultural, or even social identity. It's incredibly comprehensive. And then there's Australia's Privacy Act of 1988, which brings a completely different angle to the table. Personal information includes opinions about an individual whose identity is apparent.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is Australia's highly specific phrasing: information or an opinion, whether true or not. Think about that for a second. This means your legal identity down under can be shaped by a totally unverified rumor. As long as your identity can be reasonably ascertained from that opinion, it legally qualifies for protection. It's a massive, highly subjective contrast to the strict tracing focus we just saw in the US.
Meanwhile, New Zealand kind of narrows in on your economic activity. Their Privacy Act protects anything relating to a living, identifiable human being, but heavily emphasizes financial health and purchase records. And up in Canada, under PIPEDA, the focus really shifts to the power of context. They place a huge emphasis on how data can be combined, defining personal information as data that, either completely on its own or when combined with other pieces of data, can single an individual out.
All right, having seen the big global landscape, let's zoom way in. What actually makes up the anatomy of your specific identity? Based on the US NIST PII guide, we're going to look at the exact items that unequivocally qualify as you.
And this brilliantly illustrates just how much of ourselves we give away. Think about your daily routine. Moving through modern society requires constantly handing over pieces of your unequivocal identity. The obvious identifiers are the ones you present all the time, right? Your driver's license or passport at a security checkpoint, your face captured on a camera, maybe your vehicle plate number scanned in a parking garage. You type out your home address for deliveries, and you use your email to register for just about everything. Each one of these daily interactions is a direct, undeniable tether to exactly who you are.
But PII goes much, much deeper than government IDs and running daily errands. It spans the biological. We're talking your DNA, your unique fingerprints, even the exact characteristics of your handwriting, all the way to the purely digital, like the login or screen name you chose when you first signed up for a forum. It includes the deeply personal history of exactly when and where you were born, right alongside the credit card numbers you used to buy a coffee. Seriously, from your very biology to your digital avatar, it is all legally categorized as you.
So the crucial point is, identity isn't always a single obvious document. Often, it's a lot like a giant puzzle. As we saw highlighted in the Canadian PPDE definition a minute ago, data doesn't have to identify you in total isolation. A single random data point might be totally harmless. But the moment an organization snaps it together with other puzzle pieces to single you out, that combined data crosses the line. It transforms into PII and instantly triggers all the legal and security responsibilities required to protect you.
We've seen how broadly these laws can be interpreted, right? From unverified opinions in Australia, to screen names in the US, to the immense power of combined data in Canada. As we generate new types of data every single day, it really leaves you wondering, what seemingly harmless digital footprint will become protected PII next? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and definitely keep questioning the digital world around you.